Okay, Peter. So today I wanted to talk about the fight between Carl Frampton and Jamal Herring, which took place in Dubai on an NTK show this weekend. Frampton was bidding to become a three-weight world champion. I want to talk a little bit about that fight, and then I really want to do a bit of a tribute to Carl Frampton. Really, I mean, he conducted himself incredibly well. In the fight, in the post-fight interview, was quite emotional as he announced his retirement. Just look back on that stellar career. Obviously, it's a time of disappointment for Frampton. But I think, the bruises here, when he comes to look back on it, it's going to be, it was an amazing career. And I think, probably Ireland's greatest ever fighter. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But I mean, looking back on that show, I'd say it was an empty arena in Dubai. Herring boxed brilliantly. Herring, this was up at super feather with Frampton previously winning his world titles at super bantam and feather. And he was bidding to become Ireland's first three-weight world champion by fighting Herring. Herring didn't look so great in his last time out, but he did look really good this time. He really capitalised on that 5-inch height advantage and I think 8-inch reach advantage. The southpaw jab was spearing, and Frampton himself said after the fight he just couldn't seem to get past it. Maybe he could have done a few years ago. Couldn't seem to get past that jab inside those long levers of Herring and work into the body, which was the plan. Herring controlled the action very well from the outside. With that spearing jab, following up with that left hand in round one. Round two, Frampton was more mobile, really trying to bob and weave inside. But even when he did get inside, to be honest, Herring was quite strong inside. It was thought that if Frampton got inside, he could bust him up a bit. But Herring was strong inside as well. The third was the same. And then in the fourth, Herring did suffer a cut over his left eye, and the blood was dripping into his eye, so it seemed to sort of galvanise Frampton a bit, and he went for it a bit more, and he did have some success. But again, Herring was also strong on the inside, and the problem was the more Frampton put the aggression on to try and capitalise on his advantage, the more he left himself open for those shots of Herring. And then in the fifth round, he did seem to walk straight onto a straight left hand, which put him over. And then in the sixth round, it was a left uppercut that really did the damage. He was wobbling all around the ring. He was trying to fight back, but he looked on unsteady legs, and Jamie Moore threw the towel in to end that great career. Then, like I say, we had quite an emotional address from Frampton in the ring, saying that was it. He said if he lost the fight, he would retire. I mean, he did say, he didn't really come in, though, I think with 1 foot outside the ring and 1 foot inside. He did say he had a great camp. He really expected to win, came to win, gave it all, and I think he just wasn't there. It was time to go, and he announced his retirement, and said boxing's been very good to him, but it's also been a bit bad to him at times. He's had his trials and tribulations inside and outside the ring a bit, and he just called it a day. But Frampton is one of those people that you don't see that often in boxing. We've got our trash talkers, and they'll always be there, and they sell a lot of tickets and all that sort of thing. But Frampton was just one of these guys. He was like a gentleman warrior. He was great inside the ropes, and he never really had a bad word to say about anyone outside of it. And you've got to give credit as well to Herring, who's cut from the same cloth. Just a really good, good fighter, good skills, very tough. But also, just genuine love between these two. I think they showed great respect between the camps, between the fighters, and it was wonderful to see. And like I say, sometimes we don't see it too often. But Carl Frampton, so to look back on where he's come from now, we can draw a curtain on that career. Born 21st of February 1987 in South Belfast, to a Catholic family. He had a stellar amateur career. He actually boxed in total 125 times as an amateur, losing only 11. In that time, in 2005, he won the Irish senior flyweight title. He boxed for the Tiger Bay Club. So it was predominantly in a unionist area of Belfast, and like I say, he was a Catholic lad. I mean, people might not know about this, but the sectarianism in Belfast is still bad. It was bad then. It was towards the end of the Troubles. Boxing, but boxing is in the DNA of Belfast, and it just seemed to, a great boxer unites everybody across the divide. And Frampton kind of seemed to do that. He seemed to transcend the divide, even later in his career, married a Protestant girl. He just seemed to, and although this might not seem like a big deal to most people, I know it's difficult to understand the sectarianism in Belfast, it was a big deal, in those circles. And, he did a lot to bring people together in Northern Ireland and unite behind him, as McGuigan did, back in the 80s. So, he went on to, in the 2007 Europeans in Dublin, he won a silver medal. And then in 2009, he won the Irish amateur featherweight title. And that's when he decided to turn pro. So he turned over, funny enough, with Cyclone Promotions, run by Barry McGuigan. And he said at the time, I want to emulate Barry. That's what I'm aiming to do. Barry united people across the divide in Northern Ireland. And obviously people still talk about that legendary night at Loftus Road in 1985 when McGuigan won his world title, dethroning Eusebio Pedrosa. So, Loftus Road. And, that was what Frampton had in his sights. And, we got to look and see, did he go on to become that legend that he set out to become? So, the career went very well. In 2010, like I said, turned over in 2009, had a few fights. In 2010, he won his first professional title, British Boxing Border Control Celtic title. So, and then in 2011, he went on to win the Commonwealth title. And this is when the super bantamweight division then was pretty hot. And you had characters like Rendell Munro and, of course, Scott Quigg coming up as well. And so you had real, some good rivalries. And really, as soon as Frampton won that Commonwealth title, he was calling out Quigg, who had the British title. So you had a rivalry there that was building and building nicely. And then, moving on to then in 2013, he boxed for the European title, and that was against Kiko Martinez. And Kiko Martinez would feature in his story a bit later on, but it was a great win. Kiko Martinez is a very tough guy. Frampton managed to stop him in the 9th round, I think. And Martinez had never been over before. So, that was a good win. He was now European champion. Interestingly enough, Kiko Martinez went off and then won the IBF Super Bantamweight world title. So the stage was set really in 2014 for Frampton to challenge Martinez again, 19 months after their first meeting, for the world title. And this was the first big night of Frampton's, the massive night. It was outdoors in the Titanic Quarter in Belfast. As I've stressed before, across sectarian, across the sectarian divide, the whole of Belfast was behind him. 18,000 people in this outdoor arena to see him be victorious over Martinez on points this time and lift that IBF title. So world champion, in 2014. So, he was coming through. He was popular. He could talk well. Good looking guy. He seemed the whole package, and he could fight. He could really fight. The accolades started to come in 2014. He was RTE Sports Personality of the Year. The wins kept coming. In 2015, he was actually voted, I think it's worth these little accolades outside the ring, he was voted by Zoo magazine as Britain's coolest man. Now, his competition in there was Tom Hardy, David Beckham, among others. So, we're talking about somebody who's really transcending the sport now and getting recognised. He was always sharp suited when he was going to the races and stuff. And like I say, he was a good looking lad. So that was quite an accolade. Britain's coolest man in 2015. And then we come into 2016. Now, this was his superb year. I think when you look back on this, this will be seen as the year that he really cemented himself, the best year he had. So in 2016, in February, he fought Quigg. So finally, the Quigg-Frampton fight came that everybody had been calling about. Like I said, it'd been a few years in the making, both undefeated. And they came together in Manchester for this huge fight. The Manchester arena was absolutely sold out. Frampton's fans travelled all the way over. You know how passionate the Manchester fans are getting behind Quigg as well. So incredible atmosphere. Unfortunately, the fight didn't particularly live up to the atmosphere. It was a little bit slow. Frampton kind of controlled the early rounds with Quigg coming in later on to try and close the gap. It wasn't a thriller. But Frampton prevailed on a split decision victory, so another title. So now he'd unified the super bantamweight titles, and so he got that great victory. So he went on. Then we're thinking, what's he going to do next? And now he had the WBA and the IBF title. And then later on in the year, he actually decided to move up in weight. So he decided, he was struggling at super bantam. He decided to move up to feather. Now this set the stage for an amazing fight. In 2016, he boxed Leo. In July 2016, he boxed Leo Santa Cruz at the Barclays Centre in New York. Again, a passionate Irish crowd. You get a great Irish crowd in New York. And this was a humdinger of a fight. I mean, Leo Santa Cruz is an incredible fighter, was also undefeated at the time. And if you look back on Frampton's record, he never ducked anyone. And you're going to see a lot of undefeated fighters coming in against Frampton and losing that and Leo Santa Cruz was to be one of them. An incredible fight. And he prevailed on a majority decision. So he was now a two-weight world champion. So he'd unified the super bantamweight title earlier in the year. Then he moved up to featherweight and he won the world title, against Leo Santa Cruz in an absolute barn burner, a classic fight. With Leo Santa Cruz having that come forward, punching in bunches, Mexican style, and Frampton really meeting fire with fire but using his superior skills to prevail. And then obviously there was great clamour for a rematch. So he was also voted, talking about accolades, 2016 Fighter of the Year by the Ring magazine, which is a huge thing that every fighter wants to get. So the unfortunate thing is, I suppose, if you look back now, that was to be his last victory in a world title fight. Because the following year he rematched Leo Santa Cruz. It was supposed to be in Belfast. And I suspect that things might have been a bit different if it was in Belfast. But in the end, the fight ended up in the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. I wouldn't say it was a repeat of the first fight. It was a very, very close fight. It was a very exciting fight. These are two guys that couldn't really have a boring fight because of the styles. But Santa Cruz did change his tactics. All the way through, as I said, Frampton had been with McGuigan, with Cyclone Promotions, promoted by Barry McGuigan and trained by his son Shane, and it was seen as a bit of a match made in heaven, and it was a great success. They did, interestingly enough, say, they expected Santa Cruz to pretty much be the same. How could he change? That's what Cruz does. He comes forward, punches in bunches on the front foot, very aggressive fighter. Santa Cruz did change his tactics in that fight. He boxed a lot more, you might say, intelligently, boxed behind the jab, didn't throw so many punches, and so Frampton had to adjust within the fight. Obviously wasn't expecting that, but it was enough for Santa Cruz to take the decision. There was a lot of clamour for a trilogy fight, because like I say, these two couldn't have a boring fight, but unfortunately that never came about. So in 2017 he lost that world title, and then in 2017, if 2016 was the amazing year, 2017 was the not so great year. You had that loss. Then you had a sort of strange thing where he was going to fight and then he didn't make the weight. He came in 1 pound over the featherweight limit, and then the fight was scrapped at the last minute. And then he seemed to have a falling out with the McGuigans, and he parted company from Shane and Barry, and that seemed to get very acrimonious. He went and took on MTK as his advisors, started training with Jamie Moore and signed with Frank Warren. And as we all know from people who've seen the recent Panorama program, McGuigan and MTK, is a big divide there, and a lot of bitterness from McGuigan. Anyway, this all ended up in court, unfortunately for Frampton, and it's a real shame to what was a bit of a fairy tale story. But he carried on. He gelled with Moore very well. Outside of the acrimony of sorting out his previous promotional and training arrangements, he seemed to be very happy in his new arrangements. The win sort of came on. He looked good, and in 2018 he went up against Josh Warrington at featherweight to try and take Josh Warrington's IBF title. It was, brilliant. Christmas 2018, great fight outdoors in Leeds. But Warrington, his star was very much rising. It was a points defeat, so it was a second defeat for Frampton, and so again he didn't have a world title. A few more wins came along, and then finally we had the final fight against Herring yesterday, when I think Frampton said it just wasn't there anymore. So he finished up with a record of 28 wins, 3 losses, unified the super bantamweight title, won the world title at featherweight, had some incredible fights, and I suspect when we look back, we're not going to remember the empty arena in Dubai, where he just looked like he didn't quite have it anymore at that top level. I think we're going to remember the nights in Belfast at the Titanic Quarter. We're going to remember the nights in the Barclays Centre in New York, that incredible fight with Leo Santa Cruz, which I think was his real high point. But we are going to remember the Las Vegas rematch. We're going to remember the night in Manchester with Scott Quigg, if not for the incredible fight, if for the incredible build-up and the incredible atmosphere. And like I said, he's conducted himself impeccably throughout his career. He's a gentleman warrior. He deserves all the accolades as he goes off into the sunset, and he's got a wonderful family, and that's what he said he wants to dedicate his life to. And I think he did succeed in becoming that legend. He was important in Northern Ireland, again, as a focal point for people to forget about any sectarian differences and come together over what was undoubtedly a great guy and a great fighter. He succeeded in that. Great achievements inside and outside the ring, and I just wish him all the best. And hopefully he'll stay involved in boxing. Like I said, the bruises have yet to heal from that fight. And it must hurt at the moment, but I could see Carl Frampton being an amazing trainer if he chose to go down that route, or maybe a promoter or whatever. But hopefully he'll stay in boxing, because we need people like that. He's a wonderful credit to the sport, and I just salute Carl Frampton. Thanks very much for the memories.